Well, good morning. Thanks for joining us. By the time the next Sunday rolls around, the calendar page will change to November, which means this year is rapidly slipping away. One of the very interesting events of this year was the visit by Pope Francis. Regardless of one's religious affiliation, the visit was remarkable, with a schedule that included addresses to the U.S. Congress and the UN General Assembly, as well as public appearances before thousands of cheering and admiring people. This morning, we'll get two perspectives on that visit. Our first guest is Bishop John Durfler from the Catholic Diocese of Marquette, and later in the show we'll also speak with Bishop Thomas Screenus from the Northern Great Lakes Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. It all starts right now.
From TV6, this is the Ryan Report. Now here's your host, Don Ryan.
Well, our first guest this morning had an opportunity to be part of the visit by Pope Francis. Born in Appleton, Wisconsin, Bishop John Durfler was ordained and installed as the 13th Bishop of Marquette on February 11, 2014. As the leader of the Marquette Diocese, he's responsible for churches across the Upper Peninsula. We're pleased he could join us this morning. Thanks for being here.
Great to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
I want to talk about the Pope's visit, but first give people at least a minute or so to get to know you better. I know you've been out traveling around, but you grew up in Appleton, Wisconsin, Wisconsin native?
Yes, born and raised in Appleton. Great city to grow up in. Good people. Good city. Enjoyed my youth there.
And you've had an opportunity now to be here for about a year and a half. Are you getting out around the diocese?
Yeah, I am. I've made it a priority of mine to try to visit all of the parishes and missions of the Diocese of Marquette. I've been to a majority of them, and I still have some to go. We have 94 parishes and missions altogether. We have grade schools all over the diocese that I've been to. I've been to the different university campuses for campus ministry. So it's certainly been a delight to travel about Michigan's Upper Peninsula and meet the wonderful people here. I very much enjoyed that.
I always like to ask, what brought you into the priesthood, and when was that decision made?
The simple answer is Jesus.
Okay.
So when I was, in high school and so forth, I was involved a lot in youth ministry programs.
Okay.
In the Diocese of Green Bay, really because I wanted to help other young people get to know and love Jesus. And really through that time, I began to experience a call to priesthood. And in specific, I remember a bus ride from Indianapolis back to Appleton, Wisconsin. I was attending a national youth ministry conference in Indianapolis, and on the bus ride home, this thought popped into my mind. John, you've done a lot of things with the church the last couple of years. Can you picture yourself doing anything else with your life? And I knew the answer to that question. No, I can't picture myself doing anything else. Yeah. And that one thing led to another, and so here I am. So ultimately, it's really all about Jesus.
You probably didn't picture yourself being the bishop of the Diocese of Marquette at that point.
No, I didn't. That was a big surprise.
Let's talk about the Pope's visit. What parts of it were you involved with?
I was in Washington, D.C., and I was part of the Holy Father's meeting with the United States bishops. On that Wednesday, we had midday prayer with him, and he addressed us, and then I was part of the canonization mass for St. Junipero Serra later that afternoon in Washington. Then I was in Philadelphia for the World Meeting of Families, took part in the Meeting for Religious Liberty, and a meeting with bishops that were gathered for the World Meeting of Families, as well as the Papal Mass that Sunday afternoon.
Obviously his visit was covered thoroughly by the media, so many of us had that impression of it, but what impressions did you have as you were there taking it in firsthand?
It's a joy to see Pope Francis as a pastor and as a shepherd. So what is most important for him is Jesus Christ and helping people get to know Jesus Christ. And so that's why he comes. He came here to help deepen our relationship with the Lord. But beyond that, he also speaks to all humankind because he has a deep love and a deep concern for every single human being. And he's there to embrace all of us with his love.
What were your impressions of, as you saw other people relating or watching the Pope, the enthusiasm?
It was a real joy. It was just a real joy to see the excitement of people, as well as to see how much people were praying at some of those events. The papal masses, in particular, were quite moving.
What about have you had a chance to gauge the reaction of some of the people in your congregations, the reaction to the visit of the Pope?
I think the reaction has been very, very positive. There were a group of people from our diocese, the Catholic Diocese of Marquette, who were there as well, and they spoke positively just about how this helps connect them more deeply with their faith, and more importantly as well, to give a sense of the broader community, the Catholic community throughout the world.
I've got some more questions. We'll get to those
Sure.
in just a couple of minutes. Back with more on the Ryan Report after we take this break. We're talking this morning with Bishop John Durfler from the Catholic Diocese of Marquette, talking about the visit of Pope Francis. What do you see as the relevance of his visit to people here in Upper Michigan? We saw him from a distance, but obviously it means things to people here as well.
Well, Pope Francis has a great love for humanity. So he comes in his visit to embrace all people. And I think there's a central message that Pope Francis keeps repeating that is helpful for all of us regardless of our religious persuasion. He keeps talking about going out into the periphery and reaching out to people who might be on the margins of society. And I think this can be an invitation to all of us in Michigan's Upper Peninsula to be more mindful of people in our communities who may be on the margins. To think of those who are poor, those who are unemployed and looking for work, and what a frustration that might be. To think of people who are suffering some problems within their home life. Think of people who might be victims of domestic violence, for example. People who are struggling from different addictions, alcoholism, drug addiction. There are so many people in our society who are facing deep problems for one way or another, and might feel left out or on the margins. And how can we as people of Michigan's Upper Peninsula all be mindful of the people on the margins and show our concern?
And I think the Bible talks about deeds.
Yes.
And certainly he lives up to that by himself visiting with homeless, eating with people who are in difficult circumstances.
Yes, he backs up his words with actions. And so he teaches us by what he did. If we think of some of aspects of his visit to visit some of the poor in Washington, D.C., to visit with prisoners. He has taken that initiative to show us what that means. He not only talks about it, he does it.
And of course he spoke out on some political issues. I'm sure it wasn't his intent to be political, but things like the care of the planet and the way our economy is managed. Do you have any reaction to some of those statements?
I do. I think to help understand where Pope Francis is coming from in these areas is that it's all about the dignity of the human person. And that needs to be foremost in our concern. And the reason why the environment is so important is because we're a part of that environment. And so harming the environment also is harming the human person. And we have to be mindful that our economy and the way we approach the economy truly strives to help people. And so that's at the center of Pope Francis's comments is really the human person and human dignity.
It was interesting to see him delivering some of those messages to the United States Congress. Did you get a chance to see that?
I wasn't able to be there in person. I was able to see that on television, and he spoke again out of that concern for humanity, and that is to be our primary concern.
And how do you feel these messages were received?
I think overall messages are received pretty well. How could we not but care about our fellow human being? And that's at really the foundation of all these practical applications that Pope Francis is making.
Have you had a chance to hear how he felt about his visit, what his reactions were to
I did have a chance to read the comments of his press conference when he was returning back to Rome, and he highlighted the welcome that he received from the people and the warmth that he received from the people of the United States, and that made a very positive impression on him.
And there's not many people who would get that kind of welcome today, all the way from the president and vice president down to the common man on the street.
Yeah. But I think that shows maybe that's how we should treat everyone, that Pope Francis is a very important spiritual leader, but he's a human being, and every human being deserves to be treated with great dignity and respect and warmth and welcome.
Thanks for coming in and sharing your thoughts on this important visit. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
I'll be back with more on the Ryan Report after we take this break. The third bishop of the Northern Great Lakes Synod in 1999. The Synod includes 82 congregations and 31,000 Lutherans in the Upper Peninsula and northeastern Wisconsin. We're pleased he could join us this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks
Pleasure to be here. Absolutely.
You know, I've known you for a long time,
Yeah.
and I know you started serving at Trinity Church back in 1980. But I guess I never did know where you're from originally.
Yes, I grew up in southern Wisconsin. I'm a farm kid. I grew up on a dairy farm and went to the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and so I'm a proud Badger.
Okay.
And graduated from there, and then I went to seminary, the Lutheran Seminary in Columbus, Ohio, and it was 35 years ago now that the bishop at that time called me and said, why don't you come up to the Upper Peninsula and serve a place up here for a while? And so I've been here 35 years.
You've been here ever since.
I have been here ever since.
You were also the assistant bishop for a time.
I was asked to do that in the summer of 1992, and I served until my election as bishop in 1999.
You, what were your impressions of the visit by I'm interested in hearing a non-Catholic clergyman and his reaction.
Well, he's a rock star that doesn't play any instruments. He's an amazing personality. The largest crowds probably of any personality that someone can draw are drawn by the Pope. And whether he's in Africa or Europe or North America, he certainly demands attention. And he's an extraordinary leader, and I would say Roman Catholics and others, including me, think that he's a breath of fresh air in the church.
You know, it's even though there are differences between Catholics and Protestants, and even within Protestant denominations,
Right.
Is it important to have someone like the Pope who can speak for Christianity?
50 years ago, very few Protestants would say that the Pope, the Bishop of Rome, the Roman Catholic leader, really speaks for them. And in many ways, of course, the Roman Catholic Pope does not speak for Protestants, but there's no doubt about it, the Pope is the leader of the spokesperson, really, for the Christian church and the world. And I have noticed how many of Lutherans and other Protestants have really found great meaning in the visit by the Holy Father to the United States.
You know, it got me thinking, is religion pretty much a local thing, or do we need some national voices, people who can speak from a national platform?
Yes, I think there's no doubt about it that leadership does set the tone. It doesn't always determine everything. We have a very basic difference, of course, in the Roman Catholic and non-Roman Catholic communities in terms of leadership, who's in charge of things, how this works, where decisions are made. In the Protestant community, congregations largely make their own decisions on many things. And of course, the hierarchical system that the Roman Catholic Church has allows for different styles of leadership. There really is no other person, though, besides the Pope, who is known as a leader, whether it's, if you could have the Orthodox bishops or Protestant presidents or bishops are just not known for conveying that kind of leadership. Another thing, too, of course, is the Pope is a political leader. He's the head of a country. They have an official status as a nation, the Vatican State. And that makes a big difference, too. And so no one else in a religious context could really come and speak, for instance, to a joint meeting of Congress. No other personality could do that except the Pope because of his political status. And he was very important. The politicians now say that, and leaders say that he was instrumental in bringing the current reconciliation that's developing between Cuba and the United States together. And also what he says about climate change and about immigration and migrants and the refugee situation is very important and gets attention, gets newspaper coverage. And while he may not have absolute decision-making in a lot of the politics of the world, he's a very influential figure.
What about that speaking out on issues as he did? Do you think that's the right direction for?
I think he made a very, he was very balanced in a lot of things. He was careful. He spoke about environmental change and all of that. He spoke about the need to welcome immigrants. Interestingly enough, he spoke that and encouraged that to the Congress, where in the United States we are a nation of immigrants, and we have welcomed refugees and immigrants by the millions for 200+ years. So and to encourage that is a good thing. But he also spoke about the family and the importance of marriage to the Congress. And so that was also very important, that he not change his positions on anything either.
I think in speaking earlier to Bishop Dörfler, he referred to him as speaking for humanity. Is that a good way to look at it?
I think, yes, I think he, without a doubt, if you were going to ask in the world, who are the spiritual leaders of the world, living spiritual leaders, I think he would certainly be the #1 person. You know, the Dalai Lama perhaps would get some people to say that he's a spiritual spokesman too, but he does, this Pope has certainly grabbed the attention of people, and how he uses that, of course, to speak about the importance of humanity's spiritual growth and development as people is just really critical.
What about the relationship between Catholics, Protestants? I think you've indicated that we've grown to accept
We have
each other.
grown a lot together. You know, for 50 years now, Lutherans and Catholics have been in dialogue, and the Lutheran World Federation, along with the Roman Catholic Church, have been working on a series of dialogues over 50 years, and a lot has been accomplished. You know, the hostility, the fear, sometimes even the anxiety between the church bodies has really diminished a lot. And yes, there are still huge differences, important differences that exist between our churches. The work of these dialogues over 50 years on the status of the church, on the Eucharist, on baptism, on all of the authority of the church has really been very important. And next year, you know, rather in 2017, we will celebrate, commemorate, remember the 500th anniversary of the beginning of the Reformation, and the Roman Church and the Lutheran community consider that to be a very important time as we think about our future together.
Well, I really appreciate your coming in this morning to talk about it. It was a very interesting event, and really wanted to get a couple of perspectives. So thanks very much.
Thank
for
you
joining
very
us.
much. Pleasure to be here.
I'll be back with some more thoughts after we take this break. Well, it's just around the corner. Next weekend, as a matter of fact. Time for us to change our clocks, which should set off the semi-annual debate about why we do it. As in all debates, there are conflicting opinions, even among those who are opposed. Today we're on daylight savings time, and after the change, we'll be back on standard time. Some feel we should just stay on standard time all year round, while others would opt to stay on daylight savings time with the maximum amount of light in the evening hours. Actually, I don't think the latter is even an option. There is a federal law that applies here. The U.S. Uniform Time Act became law in 1966 and mandated that daylight savings would be observed across the country, but any state could be exempt by passing a law if it exempted the entire state. Alaska, Arizona, Hawaii, Indiana, and Michigan chose to do so. This happened during my early years at TV6, and I can recall one of the impacts of Michigan not being in step with the rest of the nation involved the fact that the major television networks presented their primetime programs during a period from 8 to 11, as they still do. But in Michigan, including here at TV6, for 6 months of the year, primetime would be from 8 to 11, and for the other 6 months from 7 to 10. That was the result of the rest of the nation going on daylight savings time, while Michigan did not. Michigan subsequently changed its mind when leaders in the state saw there were a number of disadvantages to being out of step with the rest of the country. There is some talk in the Michigan legislature about taking Michigan out of daylight savings time again. So it will be interesting to see if the state wants to be in sync with the rest of the country or out of sync for part of the year. A couple of things to consider as we approach the time change this year. First, we get to set our clocks back an hour, which means we gain an hour of sleep that night. Another way to look at it, we're getting back that hour of sleep we lost in the spring. I know I've been waiting for that. And for those who want to plan ahead, daylight savings time returns on March 13th, 2016. So don't be surprised when the sun comes up a little earlier in the morning and darkness arrives an hour sooner in the evening. Of course, by the time December 21st rolls around, we'll be lucky if we see daylight for 9 hours a day. No matter what our clocks say, and one more thing, if you forget to adjust your clock next weekend, you'll be here an hour or two early for next week's show. At least I think that's the way it works. I'll be back in 2 minutes. Well, I want to thank Bishop Dürfler and Bishop Skrinas for joining us this morning. The visit to the United States by Pope Francis was a unique event, and it was interesting to have reflections from a couple of different perspectives. The Today Show is set to roll. I have to say goodbye. Thanks for being with us today, and I hope you'll be back with us next Sunday morning.